They say love conquers all. But what happens when love becomes a weapon? One woman had to answer the hardest question of her life. Should she flee like the others, or stand and fight? The belt cracked through the air like thunder, and James Patterson froze mid-stride, his raised fist trembling above his head. His wife, Vivian Rodriguez, stood before him, her pregnant belly prominent beneath her dress, her eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to set the very air around her ablaze. In her hand, she held his own leather belt, the one he had reached for moments before, the one that had hung like a threat on their bedroom wall for weeks. But now the weapon had changed hands, and the hunter had become the hunted. "You want to hit me?" Vivian's voice cut through the humid afternoon air of their small apartment in Riverside Heights, a sprawling neighborhood on the outskirts of Atlanta where everyone knew everyone's business and secrets traveled faster than the wind. "You want to do to me what you did to Jennifer? What you did to Sarah? Then come. But know this, James Patterson, I am not them. I am the daughter of Colonel Thomas Rodriguez, and I was not raised to cower." James's hand slowly lowered. Sweat beaded on his broad forehead, running down the sides of his face like tears he had never learned to cry. His chest heaved with rage and something else, something that tasted like fear, bitter and foreign on his tongue. This was not how it was supposed to go. This was not how it had gone before. Before we dive into this story, if you believe in standing against injustice, hit that subscribe button and stay until the end. This story has a lesson that could change your life or someone you love. The story of James Patterson was well known in Riverside Heights, passed from mouth to mouth like currency, like warning, like prophecy. He was a tall man, standing well over 6 feet, with shoulders that seemed carved from oak and a smile that could light up a room or hide the darkness that festered beneath. Women had always been drawn to him, to his easy charm and smooth words, to the way he could make them feel like they were the only person in the world when he turned his attention their way. But those who got close enough to see past the smile, to glimpse what lived behind his eyes, learned too late that James Patterson was a man at war with himself, and he fought his battles on the bodies of the women who loved him. His first wife, Jennifer, had been a quiet girl from a good family, a teacher at the local elementary school with dreams of raising children who would change the world. She had married James believing in the goodness she saw in him, believing that her love could soften the hard edges she occasionally glimpsed. For 6 months, she believed. Then came the first slap, sharp and stunning, over a meal that had grown cold while she waited for him to come home. Then came the second and the third, and soon she stopped counting, stopped believing, stopped dreaming. One morning, while James was at work, Jennifer packed a single bag and disappeared. Her family refused to speak of her, and James told everyone who would listen that she had been unstable, ungrateful, unworthy of the life he had tried to give her. His second wife, Sarah, had been different. She was a sales clerk at the mall, loud and vibrant, with a laugh that could be heard 3 stores away and a spirit that seemed unbreakable. People said Sarah would be the one to tame James, to match his fire with her own. For a while, it seemed they were right. But fire, when it meets fire, does not always create warmth. Sometimes it creates destruction. Their fights were legendary in Riverside Heights, shouting matches that spilled into the streets, doors slamming, glass breaking, neighbors pretending not to hear. And then one day, Sarah stopped fighting back. Her laughter grew quieter, then disappeared entirely. She moved through the mall like a ghost, her eyes downcast, her shoulders hunched. When she finally left, slipping away in the night just as Jennifer had done, no one was surprised. But everyone was saddened, because they had watched the light die in her eyes, and they had done nothing to stop it. James's parents, Pastor Robert and Mrs. Patterson, had tried. Oh, how they had tried. His mother had prayed, fasted, brought in counselors and ministers, anyone who might drive out whatever demon possessed her son's temper. His father had reasoned, shouted, pleaded, threatened. But James wore his rage like armor, and nothing could penetrate it. After Sarah left, after the neighborhood began to whisper and point, after even the men who had once clapped James on the back and called him brother began to cross the street when they saw him coming, Pastor Robert made a decision that broke Mrs. Patterson's heart but saved what remained of their dignity. "You are no longer my son," Pastor Robert had said, standing in the doorway of James's apartment, his voice heavy with grief and finality. "Whatever I have given you, I now take back. My name, my blessing, my hope. Until you learn that a man's strength is measured not by the fear he inspires, but by the protection he provides, you will walk this earth alone. Do not come to my house. Do not speak my name. In my eyes, James Patterson is dead. Mrs. Patterson had wept, but she had not argued. She had seen too much, forgiven too much, hoped too much. And so James found himself truly alone, cut off from family and community, a pariah in the only home he had ever known. He told himself he did not care. He told himself they were all weak, that they did not understand the pressures he faced, the disrespect he endured, the way the world seemed designed to push him to the edge. He told himself many things, but late at night, when the anger finally ebbed and left him empty, he knew they were lies. 3 years passed. James moved through life like a man underwater, everything muted and distant. He went to work at the construction site, came home, ate alone, slept alone, woke alone. He avoided the places where people gathered, the churches and stores and sports bars where tongues wagged and memories were long. He told himself he preferred the solitude, that he had learned his lesson, that he would never let another woman get close enough to disappoint him, to provoke him, to bring out the beast he worked so hard to keep caged. And then he met Vivian Rodriguez. She was standing at the bus stop on Peachtree Street, tall and elegant in a blue dress that hugged her curves like poetry. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried herself with a grace that seemed almost regal, her spine straight, her head high, her eyes taking in the world with a mixture of curiosity and quiet confidence. James had walked past her once, twice, unable to stop himself from glancing back. On the third pass, she caught him looking and smiled, not coy or flirtatious, but open and friendly, the kind of smile that invited connection without demanding it. "Are you waiting for someone, or are you just enjoying the afternoon sun?" she asked, her voice rich and warm, tinged with amusement. James felt heat rise to his face, embarrassed to be caught staring like a schoolboy. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You just looked beautiful," she supplied, one eyebrow raised. "It's all right. I know. But I'm also intelligent, hardworking, and I have very high standards. So if you're thinking of asking me to dinner, you should know what you're getting into." He laughed, surprised by her directness, charmed by her confidence. "Is that a challenge?" "It's a warning," she said, but she was smiling. "My name is Vivian Rodriguez. And you are?" "James Patterson." Her smile faltered for just a moment, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. She had heard the name, heard the stories. Everyone in Atlanta, it seemed, had heard the stories. But she did not turn away, did not make an excuse and hurry off as he expected. Instead, she studied him with those sharp, intelligent eyes, as if looking for something beneath the surface, some truth that the rumors might have missed or distorted. "I've heard that name," she said carefully. "I've heard stories." James felt his jaw tighten, the familiar shame and anger rising in his chest. "I'm sure you have. I make it a practice not to judge people by stories," Vivian continued, her voice gentle but firm. "I prefer to know them myself. But I also make it a practice not to be foolish. So if you want to take me to dinner, James Patterson, you should know that I ask questions, I expect honesty, and I don't tolerate disrespect. Not from anyone." He should have walked away. He should have known that this woman, with her clear eyes and strong spine, would see through him eventually, would find the darkness he carried and run from it, as the others had. But something in him, some small, desperate part that still believed in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility that he could be more than his worst moments, made him nod. "I understand," he said, "and I respect that. So how about Saturday? There's a nice restaurant on Lenox Road. Nothing fancy, but the food is good and the atmosphere is quiet. We can talk." She considered this, weighing him with her gaze, and then nodded. "Saturday, 7 o'clock. Don't be late." He wasn't late. He was 15 minutes early, dressed in his best shirt and slacks, his shoes polished until they gleamed, his hair freshly cut, his hands trembling slightly as he waited outside the restaurant. When Vivian arrived, she was even more stunning than he remembered, dressed in a simple green dress that brought out the warm undertones of her skin. They talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing, about their childhoods and their dreams, about music and food and the small joys that made life worth living. James found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in years. And Vivian watched him with those perceptive eyes, listening not just to his words, but to what lay beneath them, to the pain and regret he tried so hard to hide. "Tell me about your marriages," she said eventually, when the meal was finished and they were lingering over cups of coffee, reluctant to let the evening end. James felt his stomach drop. "You don't want to talk about that. It's not a good story." "I know it's not a good story," Vivian said quietly. "That's why I want to hear it. I want to hear it from you, in your own words, with your own truth. Because if we're going to continue seeing each other, James, I need to know who you are. All of who you are, not just the charming man who makes me laugh." So he told her. He told her about Jennifer and the anger that had risen in him like a tide, sudden and overwhelming, over things that seemed so small now, so insignificant. He told her about Sarah and the way they had brought out the worst in each other, the way their love had curdled into something toxic and destructive. He told her about his parents' rejection and the years of loneliness that followed. And as he spoke, he felt something loosening in his chest, some knot of shame and self-hatred beginning to unravel. Vivian did not interrupt, did not judge, did not offer platitudes or easy forgiveness. She simply listened, her face grave, her eyes never leaving his. When he finished, they sat in silence for a long moment. Then Vivian reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. "That took courage. But I need to tell you something now, and I need you to listen carefully. I am the daughter of Colonel Thomas Rodriguez. My father spent 30 years in the Army, and he raised me with the same discipline and strength he learned there. He taught me that respect is not given because of gender or size or power. It is earned through character and action. He taught me that true strength is not in domination, but in protection, not in fear, but in love. And he taught me that a woman who does not stand for herself will fall for anything." She paused, her grip on his hand tightening slightly. "I believe that people can change, James. I believe that you can change if you truly want to. But I will not be your rehabilitation project. I will not sacrifice myself on the altar of your redemption. If you want to be with me, you will treat me with respect, always. You will speak to me with kindness, always. You will honor me with your actions, always. And if you ever raise your hand to me in anger, I will not run like the others. I will fight back, and my father will make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. Do you understand?" James felt tears pricking at his eyes, ashamed and grateful and terrified all at once. "I understand, and I promise you, Vivian, I will be different. You make me want to be different. You make me believe I can be." She smiled then, a small, cautious smile that held more hope than certainty. "Then let's see where this goes." The months that followed were the happiest James had ever known. He courted Vivian with a gentleness that surprised even himself, bringing her flowers and writing her letters, taking her to Stone Mountain and listening to her talk about her work as a civil servant, her dreams of starting a foundation for young girls, her love for her family. He met Colonel Rodriguez, a stern man with iron-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see straight into James's soul, and endured the interrogation with as much grace as he could muster. "My daughter tells me you have a past," the colonel said, sitting across from James in his neat, austere living room, where military medals lined the walls and the furniture was arranged with geometric precision. "A violent past." "Yes, sir," James said, meeting the older man's gaze. "I do, and I am ashamed of it. But I am trying to be better. Vivian makes me want to be better." "Wanting is not enough," Colonel Rodriguez said flatly. "I have seen many men want to change. I have seen few who actually do. But my daughter believes in you, and I have learned to trust her judgment. So I will give you my blessing, James Patterson, but it comes with a warning. If you hurt her, if you lay a hand on her in anger, if you give her even one moment of the fear you gave your previous wives, I will not call the police. I will handle it myself. And I promise you, what I learned in the Army about breaking men, I have not forgotten. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, sir," James whispered, and he meant it. They were married in a simple ceremony at the church, with both families in attendance. Pastor Robert and Mrs. Patterson came, tears streaming down their faces, offering their blessing with trembling voices. James's father pulled him aside before the ceremony began. "My son," he said, and James nearly broke down at the sound of those words he had not heard in 3 years. "This is your last chance. This is your redemption. Do not waste it. I won't, Dad. I swear to you, I won't. For a while, it seemed he would keep that promise. James was a model husband, attentive and loving, helping with chores and listening when Vivian came home from work stressed and frustrated. He bit his tongue when anger sparked in his chest, walked away when he felt the old rage beginning to rise. Vivian noticed his efforts and praised them, and in her praise, he found strength. They talked about the future, about children and careers, and growing old together. And when Vivian told him she was pregnant, standing in their small kitchen with tears of joy in her eyes, James wept and promised that their child would never see the monster he had been, would only know the man he was becoming. But pregnancy changed things. Vivian's body transformed, swelling with new life, and with it came exhaustion and mood swings and 1,000 small irritations that she could not help. She snapped at him sometimes, her patience worn thin by discomfort and hormones. She forgot things, left dishes in the sink, fell asleep in the middle of conversations. And James, despite his best intentions, despite all his promises and prayers, felt the old familiar frustration building in his chest like pressure in a kettle, hissing and dangerous. He tried to control it. He really did. He went for long walks when he felt it rising, pounded nails into wood at the construction site with a fury that made his co-workers step back. But it was never enough. The anger was always there, waiting, patient, hungry. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon, for months into Vivian's pregnancy. It was a small thing, insignificant really. James had asked Vivian to prepare his favorite meal, fried chicken with collard greens, and she had forgotten, too tired after a long week of work to remember. When he came home and found the kitchen empty, no pot bubbling on the stove, no welcoming smell of spices and comfort food, something inside him snapped. "You forgot," he said, his voice tight. Vivian looked up from the couch where she had been dozing, confusion clouding her face. "Forgot what?" "The food. I told you this morning I wanted fried chicken. You said you would make it." She blinked, memory slowly returning, and then sighed. "James, I'm sorry. I was so tired I forgot. I can make it now if you want, or we can order something." "Order something," he repeated, his voice rising. "Why should I have to order something in my own house? Why can't my wife do the one thing I ask of her?" Vivian sat up slowly, her hand instinctively moving to her belly, her eyes narrowing. "James, it's just food. Don't make this into something it's not." "It's not just food," he shouted, and he saw her flinch, saw fear flash across her face, and instead of making him stop, it fueled him. "It's about respect. It's about you caring enough to remember what I ask for. But you don't care, do you? You're too busy being tired, being pregnant, being too good to do your duty as a wife." "My duty." Vivian's voice was cold now, the fear replaced by anger. "My duty is to grow our child, James. My duty is to work 8 hours a day and then come home and clean and cook and take care of you. And I do it, every day, without complaint. But today I forgot one meal, and you're shouting at me like I committed a crime. This is not who you promised to be." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hand raised before he even knew what he was doing, the rage consuming him completely. "Don't you dare lecture me about promises, woman. Don't you dare." His fist was inches from her face when Vivian moved. Not backward, as he expected, not cowering or pleading, but forward. She stepped into his space with the speed and precision her father had drilled into her since childhood, her hand shooting up to catch his wrist mid-swing. Her grip was iron tight, her nails digging into his skin. "Stop," she said, her voice low and dangerous. James tried to pull free, shocked by her strength, but Vivian held firm. For a frozen moment, they stood locked together, his fist trapped in her grip, their eyes meeting. And what he saw in her eyes was not fear. It was fury. It was disappointment. It was determination. "Let go of me," he growled, trying again to wrench his arm free. "No," Vivian said. "Not until you remember who you are. Not until you remember what you promised." "I said let go," James roared, and with his free hand, he shoved her backward. Not hard enough to hurt the baby, some small part of his brain still functioning enough to hold back, but hard enough to break her grip, hard enough to send her stumbling against the chair. Vivian caught herself, breathing hard, her hand instinctively going to her belly to check that the baby was safe. And as she steadied herself against the chair, her fingers brushed against something. The belt. His belt, the thick leather one he wore to work, the one he had carelessly tossed over the chair back when he came home, too angry to hang it properly. Her fingers closed around it. James was advancing on her again, his face twisted with rage, his fists still clenched. You think you can tell me what to do in my own house? You think you can disrespect me, and I'll just take it? Disrespect? Vivian's voice rose, and she pulled the belt from the chair, holding it at her side. I forgot to cook one meal, James. One meal. And you want to beat me for it? You want to put your hands on your pregnant wife because you're hungry? It's not about the food, he shouted, taking another step toward her. It's about you not caring, not listening, not. The belt whistled through the air. The sound stopped him mid-sentence, mid-step. It hadn't touched him, but it had come close enough that he felt the displacement of air against his outstretched arm. He looked down, stunned, and saw the red welt already forming on his forearm where the leather had grazed his skin. His eyes moved slowly up to Vivian's face. She stood before him now, the belt gripped firmly in both hands, her pregnant belly prominent beneath her dress, her spine straight as a spear. Her eyes blazed with a fury that seemed to light her from within, and there was no tremor in her hands, no hesitation in her stance. You want to hit me? She said, her voice steady and cold as ice. You want to do to me what you did to Jennifer? What you did to Sarah? Then come, James Patterson. But know this, I am not them. I was not raised to cower. I am the daughter of Colonel Thomas Rodriguez, and he taught me that a woman who does not fight for herself is already dead. James stood frozen, his brain struggling to process what was happening. This was not how it was supposed to go. The women before had cried, had pleaded, had eventually submitted or fled. But Vivian stood her ground, the weapon he had meant to use now in her hands, turned against him. Vivian, he said, his voice uncertain now, the rage draining away and being replaced by confusion, by the first stirrings of fear. Put that down. You don't understand. I wasn't going to. Liar, she cut him off. Your fist was raised. Your intention was clear. And I saw it in your eyes, James. I saw the monster you told me was gone. The monster you promised me would never touch me. She took a step forward, and instinctively, James took a step back. All these months, I believed you. Vivian continued, her voice breaking now, tears beginning to stream down her face even as her grip on the belt remained firm. I believed you had changed. I believed that my love, my strength, my faith in you would be enough. I stood beside you when your own family turned away. I defended you to my father when he told me you would never change. I gave you everything, James. Everything. And this is how you repay me. I'm sorry, James whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Sorry. Vivian's voice rose to a shout. Sorry? You think sorry is enough? You think I can raise our child in a house where I have to wonder every day if this will be the day you forget your promises? Where I have to walk on eggshells to avoid triggering your precious temper? She swung the belt again, and this time she meant it. The leather cracked across his shoulder with a force that made him cry out, more from shock than pain. He stumbled backward, his hand going to the burning welt, his eyes wide with disbelief. Vivian, what are you? What am I doing? She advanced on him, the belt raised. I am teaching you a lesson that should have been taught to you long ago. I am showing you what it feels like to be on the receiving end of violence. I am fighting back. The belt came down again, across his back, and James cried out. He was bigger than her, stronger, and he could have easily overpowered her, taken the belt from her hands. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, the absolute conviction that she would not back down. Maybe it was the shame that washed over him as he realized what he had almost done, who he had almost become again. Or maybe it was simply exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of carrying his rage for so long that the thought of one more fight, one more battle, was more than he could bear. Stop, he begged, raising his hands in front of his face, not to strike, but to shield. Please, Vivian, stop. Why should I stop? She demanded, the belt raised again, trembling in her grip. Did you stop when Jennifer begged you? Did you stop when Sarah cried? No, James whispered, and then louder, no. I didn't stop. Please forgive me. And then, as if all the strength had left his body, he sank to his knees, his hands covering his face, and he wept. Great, heaving sobs that shook his whole body, years of pain and anger and self-loathing pouring out of him like poison from a wound. Vivian stood over him, the belt still in her hand, her chest rising and falling rapidly, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. "I won't let you do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I won't let you destroy us. I love you, James, but I love myself more. And I love our child more. And if I have to beat sense into you to protect us, then that is what I will do." She looked at him there on his knees, this man she had married, this man she had believed in, this man who had almost destroyed everything. And she made a decision. She dropped the belt at his feet and walked past him, stepping over his hunched form. She went to the bedroom, closing the door quietly behind her. James heard the lock click, heard her moving around inside, heard the scrape of furniture being pushed against the door. He remained kneeling on the floor, broken and ashamed, staring at the belt that lay before him like an accusation. And for the first time in his life, James Patterson understood what his victims had felt. The fear, the helplessness, the betrayal. He picked up the belt with trembling hands, looked at it for a long moment, and then hung it on a nail by the door where it would be visible every time he entered the house. A reminder, a warning, a testament to his failure. Then he sat down on the floor, his back against the wall, and waited. He didn't know what for. He didn't know what would happen next. He only knew that everything had changed, and there was no going back to who he had been, to what they had been. The old James, the man who thought violence was strength, was dying. And the new James, if there could be a new James, would have to be born from this moment of absolute defeat. An hour later, there was a knock at the door. James, still sitting on the floor, his face swollen from crying, looked up. The knock came again, harder this time, more insistent. He dragged himself to his feet and opened the door. 4 police officers stood in the doorway, and behind them, stern and imposing in his crisp white shirt, stood Colonel Thomas Rodriguez. "James Patterson," one of the officers said, "you are to come with us." James's heart sank. He looked past the officers to the bedroom door, which had opened slightly. Vivian stood in the doorway, her phone in her hand, her face set in stone. "What? Why? I didn't do anything. I didn't touch her." "You raised your hand to her," Colonel Rodriguez said, his voice like iron. "My daughter called me. She told me everything. And now you will learn what happens when a man forgets his place." "Colonel Rodriguez, please," James begged, using the formal title, his voice desperate. "I'm sorry. I stopped. She stopped me. I didn't hurt her. Please don't do this. You stopped because she stopped you," the colonel said coldly, stepping forward until he was inches from James's face. "You stopped because my daughter is not a victim, but a warrior. Because I raised her to be strong, to be brave, to never bow to bullies and cowards. But stopping is not enough, James Patterson. Remorse is not enough. You must learn. You must be taught. You must understand in your bones what you have done, what you almost did, what you will never do again." The colonel's eyes burned into James's, and James felt himself shrinking under that gaze, felt the full weight of his shame pressing down on him. "And so you will come with these officers," the colonel continued, "and you will spend 3 days in corrective lodging. 3 days to think about what kind of man you want to be. 3 days to confront the monster that lives inside you. 3 days to understand that my daughter's mercy is the only thing standing between you and my wrath. Because if she had not stopped you, if she had not been strong enough to fight back, I would not be sending you to lodging. I would be sending you to the hospital, or the morgue. Do you understand me?" James nodded mutely, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The colonel stepped back, and the officers moved forward, gently but firmly taking James's arms. As they led him toward the door, James looked back at Vivian one last time. "Vivian," he called out, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please." Vivian met his eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, her hard expression softened. "I know you are," she said quietly. "But sorry is not enough, James. Change is what I need. Real change. Lasting change. And if this is what it takes for you to change, then this is what must happen. I am doing this because I love you. Because I love us. Because I love our child. And sometimes love means being strong enough to let someone face the consequences of their actions." The officers led him out, and James went without resistance, his head bowed, his spirit crushed. Vivian watched from the doorway until the police van disappeared around the corner. Then she closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, her whole body trembling. She slid down to the floor, her hand on her belly, and finally let herself cry. Not for James, but for herself. For the future she had imagined that now seemed so uncertain. For the innocence she had lost, the trust that had been broken. For the hard road that lay ahead, whether James changed or whether she would have to raise their child alone. But even as she cried, even as her heart broke, Vivian knew she had done the right thing. She had stood up. She had fought back. She had not let fear or love or hope paralyze her into silence. And whatever happened next, she would face it with her head high and her spine straight, just as her father had taught her. The 3 days that followed were the longest of James's life. The corrective lodging was not a jail, exactly, but a program run by retired military men who specialized in teaching discipline and respect to men who had lost their way. The facility was stark and unforgiving, a converted barracks on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by high walls and guard towers that felt less like protection and more like imprisonment. They woke him at dawn with cold water dumped over his head, shocking him from fitful sleep into shivering alertness. There was no time to protest, no time to complain. Within minutes, he was outside in the courtyard with 24 other men, all of them there for similar reasons, all of them carrying the same shame in their eyes. The physical exercises were brutal. Push-ups until his arms gave out, then more push-ups, running laps around the compound until his lungs burned and his legs trembled, holding planks until sweat poured into his eyes and his whole body shook with the effort. And through it all, the instructors shouted at them, not with mindless abuse, but with pointed questions designed to break through their defenses. You think you're strong because you can hit a woman? Sergeant Williams, a scarred veteran with eyes that had seen too much, yelled as they ran. A woman who weighs half what you do? A woman who is carrying your child? That's not strength. That's weakness. True strength is restraint. True strength is choosing not to hurt when you have the power to hurt. After the physical training came the mental training. They were made to sit in silent meditation for hours, forced to confront their own thoughts, their own demons, without the distraction of anger or excuses or self-justification. James found this harder than any physical exercise. In the silence, he could not escape himself. He saw Jennifer's tears. He heard Sarah's pleas. He felt Vivian's disappointment like a knife to his heart. Why do you think you deserve love? One of the counselors asked him during a private session on the second day. The man was older, perhaps in his 60s, with kind eyes that somehow made his questions cut deeper. What have you done to earn it? I don't know, James admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't think I do deserve it. Then why do you get angry when you think it's being withheld? The counselor pressed. Why do you lash out when you feel disrespected or ignored? If you truly believed you were unworthy of love, you would accept neglect as your due. But you don't. You rage against it. Why? James struggled to answer, struggled to find words for feelings he had never examined. Because it hurts. It hurts to be ignored. It hurts to feel like I don't matter. So you hurt others to stop your own hurt, the counselor said gently. You pass your pain on to those who love you, like a disease. Tell me, James, did it work? Did hurting them make you hurt less? No, James whispered, tears streaming down his face. No, it made it worse. It made everything worse. Then perhaps, the counselor said, it is time to learn a different way. On the third day, they brought him to a room where 5 women sat in a circle, women who had survived domestic violence, women who bore scars both visible and hidden. They told their stories, one by one, and James listened with tears streaming down his face as he heard his own actions echoed in their words, his own excuses repeated by the men who had hurt them. One woman, her voice barely above a whisper, described hiding in a closet with her children while her husband raged outside, and James saw Jennifer's face, heard her quiet sobs the mornings after. Another woman, angry and fierce, talked about fighting back and the cost of that fight, and James saw Sarah's broken spirit, remembered the way her laughter had died. And when it was his turn to speak, to tell them what he had done, he found himself unable to hide behind justifications or blame. I hurt them, he said simply. I hurt them because I was angry, and I took that anger out on the people who loved me. I told myself it was their fault, that they provoked me, that they didn't respect me. But the truth is, I didn't respect myself. I hated who I was, and I made them pay for it. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The women listened, and when he finished, one of them, An elderly woman with kind eyes and gray hair reached out and patted his hand. "Sorrow is the beginning," she said. "But it is only the beginning. Now you must prove it with your actions, every day, for the rest of your life." When James returned home on the fourth day, humble and exhausted, he found Vivian sitting in the living room, waiting. She looked at him for a long moment, taking in his bowed head, his red-rimmed eyes, the new heaviness in his shoulders that spoke of genuine remorse. "Are you ready to talk?" she asked. "Yes," he said, and then, more softly, "I'm ready to listen." They talked for hours, late into the night. James told her about the lodging, about the exercises and the meditation and the women who had shared their pain with him. He told her about the shame he felt, the horror of seeing himself through their eyes, the determination he now carried to never be that man again. Vivian listened, her hands folded over her belly, her face unreadable. "I want to believe you," she said finally. "I want to believe that this time is different, that you've truly changed. But James, I need you to understand something. I forgive you, because forgiveness is a gift I give to myself, not to you. Forgiveness frees me from carrying the weight of your actions. But forgiveness is not forgetting. And forgiveness is not permission to try again." She stood and walked to the wall where the belt hung, touched it lightly with her fingers. "This stays here, as a reminder, as a promise. If you ever raise your hand to me again, if you ever make me feel afraid in my own home, I will use it again. And next time, I won't call my father. I will handle it myself, and then I will leave, and you will never see me or our child again. Do you understand?" "I understand," James said, his voice hoarse. "And I promise you, Vivian, you will never need to use it. I promise you." News of what had happened spread through Riverside Heights like wildfire, the way all news did in that tight-knit community. People whispered and pointed, some in judgment, some in admiration, some in disbelief. James's parents heard about it and came to the house, his mother weeping with a mixture of shame and hope, his father silent but present, waiting to see if this change would last. Pastor Robert pulled James aside, just as he had done at the wedding. "You have been given a gift," he said quietly. "A wife who is strong enough to fight for you even when you are fighting against yourself. A wife who loves you enough to demand better from you. Do not waste this gift, my son. Do not waste this chance." "I won't, Dad," James promised. "I swear to you, I won't." The months that followed were not easy. Change, real change, never is. There were moments when James felt the old anger rising, when frustration or stress made his hands clench and his jaw tighten. But now, instead of lashing out, he walked away. He went to the bedroom and looked at the belt hanging on the wall, remembered the shame and pain of those 3 days, remembered Vivian's eyes as she stood over him with that belt in her hand. And the anger would drain away, leaving him tired but in control. Moral lesson. This story teaches us about strength, love, and transformation that every person must understand. That as women, true strength is not in enduring abuse silently, but in standing firm against it. Your worth is not measured by how much pain you can tolerate or how much you can sacrifice for someone else's redemption. And that as men, real strength is measured not by the fear you inspire, but by the protection you provide. A man who needs violence to feel powerful is not strong. He is weak, broken, and dangerous. Your anger is your responsibility, not your partner's fault. No matter what frustrations you face, no matter what disrespect you perceive, nothing justifies raising your hand against someone you claim to love. And for everyone, forgiveness is not forgetting, and reconciliation requires genuine transformation, not just remorse. If this story resonates with you, show your support by hitting that like button. It helps us reach more people who need this message. Subscribe for more powerful stories that matter. And most importantly, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your share could save a life. Drop a comment below telling us what you learned from Vivian's courage. We read every single one.